So this is really fun for me to be here. This is going to be the last. So I got to tell you, I don't know, it's been a circuitous path, so it'll be fun to share some of that with you. So I was going to kick off with a little intro and then get into some background, and then Eric helped me work out what I hope will be an engaging presentation. So right now, the obvious thing is that there's 50,000 things in every supermarket you go into. How do you choose? And apparently lots of people have been choosing more than one thing when they go into the supermarket. And you know, as much as you're into the sustainable food movement, this is one of the things that's driving it. Never before have people seen this health issue. So sort of undernutrition is heart-wrenching. And it's here in the U.S. It's just not as obvious now because it's in pockets. But obesity is everywhere, and it's in kids. So it's really alarming, you know, and it's related to heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. But those three chronic diseases you don't really see for decades. You don't really get your heart attack or get the cancer until you're in your 60s, 70s, or 80s. And you can get this when you're 10 or 12. And they've got the films of 12-year-old girls getting liposuction and now bariatric surgery. So I think that may not be your main interest, but it's, and I think it actually gets abused a little bit, but from a public health perspective, it's useful. It's very visible. It's alarming, right? So if you go, the big killers here are these 6, and 4 of the 6 are clearly related to diet, and that's not new. Everybody knows that, but the obesity epidemic somehow has reframed a sense of urgency here that I think is part of the reason this is taking off. So who do you blame? It's kind of easy to say, oh, it's all those evil food producers. They're making all this horrible food. But isn't that the American way? People make innovative things. If you've ever read Eric Schlosser's stuff about how all the fast food industry giants got started, it's heartwarming. They were like vacuum cleaner salesmen, and they decided to pitch something innovative, and they created this industry. So another thing is just, oh, it's those individuals. They're just victims. They have no willpower. If we could just educate them. And we've been trying to educate them, and it doesn't really work. If you ever read David Kessler's book, he's the ex-head of the FDA, a book called End of Overeating. There's really powerful addictions built into sugars and some other things that we're just not accustomed to being exposed to all that. And now that we are, a lot of people are really susceptible to it. And you can't really blame them. It's not a willpower thing. It's beyond willpower. So I think a new target audience here are the food systems. It's really different than blaming the individual and blaming the industry, because the blame thing doesn't work very well. And so I'm going to start and end on this note. What you're seeing in food systems is some people are rising to the challenge, and in their school or their work site or their hospital, we have these spark plugs that are doing amazing things. But they don't really know how to evaluate the impact or how to improve the impact, and so there's an opportunity to go here and propel this thing forward, because it's already moving on its own. But there's a tremendous opportunity to propel this forward and have a big impact. So somebody's got to help us, and I was kind of hoping it could be me. And so now I'm going to take a step back and go through a few things. Now, is it going to drive you crazy that it's crooked? Because there's an easy way to straighten this out. I just got to move it more in front, I think. I don't know if it'll mess up the podcast.
Great.
A little straighter, right? Okay. So here's me. I really shouldn't be here. I was a hippie philosopher at Colgate University. I took a 6-year break after college. My parents were worried I'd never really amount to anything. I was just finding myself. And at one point I found myself, and I decided I would open a vegetarian restaurant. Now, I've been a vegetarian for 30 years. I have 4 boys, 4, 6, 17, and 20 that are all vegetarian too. So I was going to open this vegetarian restaurant, and then to make a long story short, because your guys are only giving me half an hour, I didn't open the restaurant. I became an associate professor of medicine at Stanford. And in the last 15 years, I have been an NIH reductionist scientist, which I friendly, in this way, call my job as being a feeder and a bleeder. So I've been giving people vegetarian diets. I've given them garlic. I've given them Atkins diet, the Ornish diet, ginkgo biloba, fish oil, soy foods, and even raw milk to see if it would help people with lactose intolerance. 1,100 people have willingly signed up to let me get them put food in their mouth and then bleed them or weigh them or whatever. And it's really been a fun ride. I mean, I was just going to start a restaurant. This is way more fun than starting the restaurant. And I publish in major medical journals, and I get invited to conferences. But I got to tell you, I don't know if this is a midlife crisis thing, but I'm not having much of an impact. I'm actually figuring out a couple of these questions and addressing some of the confusion. But I don't think I really changed what the average person eats. Because I'll tell you one thing that frustrated me. We did this best ever garlic study that anybody ever did, and it doesn't lower your cholesterol. Take it from me, it doesn't. And I could talk about it for a whole hour. And the next day, I looked in the paper later that week, and this may be narcissistic to think this was me, but there was a comic strip. And the comic strip had this kid, and his mom was washing dishes. She said, I am so frustrated with those scientists. One day they say something is good for you, and the next day it's not. And the little kid looks up and says, Mommy, why don't you eat every other day then? And I laughed at first, and I thought, wait, my garlic study was just in the paper earlier this week, and before they said it was good, and I just said it wasn't good, and the headline was wrong. It said, Stanford says garlic's no good for you, when in fact what we really said is if you're hypercholesterolemic and you take 1 clove of garlic a day for 6 months, it won't lower your LDL cholesterol. But that doesn't make for a very sexy headline, so it was sexier to say Stanford says garlic's no good for you. So I felt like I was contributing to the confusion, even though it wasn't my intent. So along about this time, somebody held that Deborah Satz decided to hold this great speaker film series on campus. She's an ethics professor. She's in charge of this speaker film series. It's up to her to rotate it every once in a while, and it always has to be ethics. So she decided to go for ethics of food and the environment. And she invited Michael Pollan and Marion Nestle and Peter Singer, and she showed these great films. And I wasn't really sure who would show up, because I'm a foodie. I was going to come, but I thought the venues might be empty, which would be great, because then I'd get to talk to these people. But they were packed. I was stunned. Campus was just overflowing with people showing up at these talks about food. And I guess one really transformational night was they asked me to lead a discussion afterwards on one of the movies. And I was just supposed to be the facilitator. Does anybody have a question? And I said, before you ask your question, who are you? Why did you come tonight? And it was really fun, because people said, I'm a farmer, I'm a chef, I'm a mom, I'm an engineer, I'm an MBA, I'm a graduate student. I was just stunned at the broad swath of life that was showing up to see these. So these food topics resonated kind of across the board to people. So I thought she was really onto something. So instead of thinking so hard about, okay, if I just clear up the health question, I get people to eat better, because that has been my focus for a long time, it occurred to me that there are a lot of hooks. And I don't have time to explain this whole thing, but they all end up with more vegetables, less meat, less packaged processed food. So if you take the global warming tack, if you take the animal rights and welfare, if you take the human labor abuse, there's a lot of angles you can take on this. And they all get at eating more healthfully, but a lot of them don't use health. Okay, and I'm going to come back to this in a little bit, so wait till I come back to that topic. So why might this be a great time to do it? So a little background on what's going on for those of you who haven't felt the groundswell, the palpable movement going on for food. If you go back to Eric Schlosser's Fast Food Nation, this is one of the best books that came out, but it's over a decade old. And it really wasn't about the health of fast food at all. It was really about human labor abuses. If you've read it, it talks about the kids who work in fast food industry and they don't get any training, but the fast food companies get a business break for hiring a new person, and then they fire them and hire a new person and get another business or tax break. It's really annoying. Or they talked about slaughterhouses where high rates of injury occur, or farm workers where they get sprayed with the pesticides. It wasn't about the health. It was really just about the system run amok, that we're making a lot of really cheap food and a lot of humans are getting hurt. And then Michael Pollan just really seemed to kick this thing off with Omnivore's Dilemma. Marion Nestle's this feisty professor from New York, and she's into the politics of it. She's served on some of these boards that say, here's our national recommendations, and she does a nice expose. showing the conflict of interest. The USDA makes our dietary guidelines and represents the cattlemen's industry, the dairy industry, the egg industry. The conflict of interest is so blatant, it's absurd. And then we got great writers like Barbara Kingsolver, who's written great novels. But this animal-vegetable miracle, it was about her giving up her home in Arizona and moving to West Virginia. And she and her whole family for a year only consumed what they raised, animals and plants. And they canned and dried and things like that. And this one is just a couple years old. I have heard more people say that this was the behavior changer for them than anything else. In fact, I teach a class, I'm going to tell you that in just a minute, and that the students just love this book. It actually will make you feel a little uncomfortable, but he does it in just the right way, that if you're on the edge, you'll move to the next stage after you wrote this. Mark Bittman turned from chef into op-ed writer. So he's a columnist writer in the New York Times, and he's got some books. He lost 50 pounds. He's promoting a plant-based diet. And then we've got movies, too, that are better than the documentaries we had in the past. So some really old documentaries that are tedious. They're not engaging. A lot of blame going around. Super Size Me is pretty funny. King Corn is this great documentary about the Farm Bill. More recently, Food Inc., but I got a whole list of these. They're just better films. They're better writers. And I think they've played a huge part in propelling this forward. So if you've got the obesity epidemic on one hand, where everybody can see something is wrong, and then you have these non-scientists. I have to say I'm a little jealous, because when I say something, I have to say it might be true that this can do that, and here's my 12 references. And these writers say, okay, this is really ridiculous, they did this, and this is awful, and this is horrible, and this happens. And then you have to see if you want to trace back all their references, which aren't scientific, but they're intuitively right. I guess that's what I like about this. It's just something is intuitively really wrong, and these folks are suggesting that we need to fix it, and there's some potential solutions. So hand in hand with this is sort of, we're nipping away at some legislation. So this is California Senate Bill 1420, where we put calories on the menu labels of any restaurant that has at least 15 in its chain. To be honest, somebody's done a study of this, and they've trashed it, saying it doesn't have an impact. There's a lot of legislation that's going to sort of get our foot in the door that we're not sure if it's really going to work, but it's scaring the food industry. I think it's actually doing its job, because first they said, we can do anything, and nobody will ever legislate us. But this thing happened, and then Californians voted for Prop 2 by getting the chickens out of those battery cages and the pigs out of the gestation cages, and Oprah and Ellen even talked about it. So, no, this is going global here. Locally, if anybody hasn't heard of the toy ban, there's a toy ordinance that started in Santa Clara, and now it's in San Francisco. And the basic idea is you can't have a Happy Meal and get a toy as an incentive for the Happy Meal unless the Happy Meal meets a minimum set of nutritional guidelines, because it's too manipulative. Is that going to end the obesity epidemic? No, but it's kind of a way to practice at this legislation. I was actually at the San Francisco Board of Supervisors meeting when they were opening this ordinance up to the public, and McDonald's, who wasn't originally even one of the targets, brought in their nationwide VP and a cadre of folks to back them up, and walked up to the podium and said, if you make this toy thing like you want to do, then our staff, they're not going to know which meal to give a toy with and which without. And Eric Marr looked at said, really? That's all you have? It was amazing. It was ridiculous. But it was fascinating to see. The woman, her lip was trembling too, and I think her eye was twitching. It didn't go over very well, but it's kind of practicing at this legislation. I don't think this is going to have a big impact, but sometimes you've got to pick the low-hanging fruit. Soda tax is another low-hanging fruit that hasn't passed yet, but just like gay marriage, soda tax is coming soon nationwide. I'm not sure when.
Does that mean gays will be able to drink soda?
Absolutely. So, and then we've got these really fascinating things very locally. So Hidden Villa has been around for decades, and it's just this amazing resource in Los Altos. Collective Roots and Full Circle Farm are a lot newer. So Collective Roots is the group in East Palo Alto that does some school gardens. Full Circle Farm I'm heavily involved with. They're really only 4 years old, but I've been going out there trying to get grants funded for 4 or 5 years with them. And I really haven't got anything funded, but I got some funding that I'm throwing their way now. And I'm going to share that with you in just a bit. So Stanford Dining on top of this, if you want to go local. So, most institutions have something like Sodexo or Aramark that provide all their food because it's really convenient. It's totally set up, but food's not really that great. It's that institutional food. Well, these guys went self-op, and they're kind of in a competition with Berkeley and Yale. There's this uber green movement in universities where some of them they have to work with the same budget. Granted, it's happening in really wealthy schools, but they don't have unlimited resources. And I know Eric in particular, working with the same budget, moved from factory farm beef to grass-fed beef from Marin Sun Farms. And he did it by buying direct from Marin Sun Farm. So when he bought from Sodexo, he had to pay a huge hike up from the middlemen who were doing all the deals. And he used some of his money to hire this sustainability coordinator. So Matt Roth got an MBA at Stanford, and he was at Dartmouth. I grew up in Hanover, New Hampshire. I don't know if our paths crossed. He grew up on a farm. And his dad wouldn't let him take over the farm. They were so much in debt from the thing of taking the diversified farm, going all corn, buying big tractors, more and more in debt, ruining the land. His dad said, sorry, you're like the 4th generation and you can't have it. I won't even pass it along to you. So he's been doing other things, and his job now is to evaluate the 50,000 items that Stanford buys. They serve 18,000 meals a day. And create a scorecard for vendors. It's not just pesticide-free or organic. It's paying your laborers a fair wage, he's creating the metric as he goes. And he gives a great presentation saying, sometimes I have the choice between big industrial organic and small, not organic, but I know them, and they're local, and they do everything right. And I picked the non-organic, small, local guy. But it's a challenge, but he's loving it. His job description was really loose, and I'm sure he works 10 or 12 hours a day because he's just making it up as he goes, and he has the support of the Stanford Dining. I was just stunned to hear how progressive they are and how they're competing with these other schools. So I think that's the landscapes. These spark plugs are showing up all over the place. These really dedicated people are doing super innovative things, and it seems to be catching on. I mean, a lot of people know someone or have heard of someone or reading about it in the paper or it's in the news. So I think I'm ready to give up my old life and just kind of propel this forward. And so that's kind of what's happening right now. And here's another link in my past, how I got swept up in all this. So Tom Robinson's a pediatrician. He's a year younger than me. He's way smarter than me. He's uber famous. He's talked to Michelle about kids and obesity. And he asked me to help him write this grant because he knew I was interested in this stuff. He said, the NIH has this proposal out. They want to know if you have any innovative ways for young adults for weight maintenance. Because that happens, if you really look at the whole spectrum of life, a lot of weight gets gained right after you leave home and you're on your own, cooking on your own, or not cooking and buying junk food. So they said, most of our methods aren't really very successful anyway, but the younger adults feel really impervious. So we need something new and innovative. So we wrote this grant up called Social Responsibility and Engagement. And that's what we were going to do. We were going to have young adults get back in touch with their food. And we submitted it, and he said, that probably doesn't have much of a chance to get funded because, in retrospect, we don't have any pilot data. Said, you're younger than me, but you're smarter than me. I believe you. We don't have any pilot data. Well, it was a good exercise writing it. Maybe we'll recycle it someday, but how would we ever get pilot data? He says, well, we could have a class. And I said, yeah, a class. Okay. So within a week, we had a class. He wrote human biology, and he signed up for this class. So we're now in the 4th year teaching this class. So what happens is we get students in there, and we have this great postdoc who has this very appropriate background for this kind of thing, and we stole all the books and speaker and films from that speaker film series that we had already vetted. We knew they were really transformative for some people. We had heard that. So, and then this is Tom, not me, but he's good at this kind of thing. There's no midterms, there's no exams, there's no quizzes. They have to write op-eds and try to get them published. They have to make YouTube videos for behavior change for their peers. And they have to blog. And they have to comment on blogs. And they have to like their blogs to their family and friends. That's how you get graded. There's no lectures. So the sneaky thing in here is Tom and I don't do any work. We actually read the books first. And we don't make them read the whole book. We pick out sections. But 2 students lead the discussion every class. And they don't even really lead. They just say, we think these are the 3 central themes. Let's all discuss. What makes you uncomfortable? What do you think is fact? What do you think is hype? And if you can imagine, the Stanford students are really critical. I don't buy that. I went and got the resource they looked. They totally misrepresented it. It's a bunch of hooey. But nonetheless, they all changed their diets in this class. I've never seen anything like this. And in the very first year we did it, we collected data. Before and after, we asked them what they were eating. And so, this is new for me. It was a publication. I didn't know if you could get this kind of thing published. But we compared our class pre-post to 3 other human biology classes that were all health classes. This isn't a really solid scientific design, but it's moving more toward this really hot topic at Stanford, which is the design school approach. And the design school approach isn't let's have a hypothesis and I already know what the right way to do it is. It's this iterative process of ideating and looking at it and going back and fixing it some more. So, keep fixing our class, but in the very first class, our class said they ate more vegetables, less dairy, less meat, less sweets, more fruit, less processed food, and we got it published. So this is interesting, because if I don't publish, I can't keep my job. So not only do I want to switch areas, but I have to keep publishing. Right about this time, the law school had a full-day symposium called Carrots and Sticks, and it was all about these legal, SB 1420 and Prop 2 and things, because soda tax, these are coming. The law school is really interested in this. I found this guy, Jay Mitchell, who has a clinic, and his law clinic specializes in farmers markets and organic farms, and that's who he helps in his law clinic. Okay, so around this time I said, okay, this is fascinating. I'm in the med school. I live in this little bubble. And to be honest, I've heard there are other schools on campus. They must be in those buildings over there. Somebody must be in those. I couldn't name the 7 schools a couple of years ago. But I found foodies in all of them. So Sarah Soul studies social movements, and she studied breast cancer and some other things. And one of her kicks now is the sustainable food movement. And Buzz Taylor over here is the head of the Woods Institute, and he was called to Congress to testify on the Farm Bill. So he's all into water resources and the Farm Bill. And Rob Reich taught a sophomore seminar completely based on Michael Pollan's book, Omnivore's Dilemma. So he had sophomores for 2 weeks come and cook food and talk about the politics of food. And David Lobel models how much rice will grow in Indonesia if the ocean temperatures rise by 1 degree. Jesse Kuhl cooks at, I don't know how many of you have eaten at a cool cafe at Cantor Museum where Eric and I ate it. What's it?
Fleet Street.
Thank you, Fleet Street. I can't believe I'm blocking. Deborah Dunn hired Carly Fiorini, and now she's an adjunct professor in the design school. And she's a total vegetarian foodie nut. She loves food. And so she taught a whole class, and I'll show you what she did with her whole class, to design an intervention to change eating behaviors in dining halls. So the whole class focus was to do this, and then the next quarter they implemented it. Sarah Wiedeker worked at Full Circle Farm and then came to Stanford to be Stanford's first farm educator. So I had this idea. I thought, there's foodies all over. I wonder if I can get a speaker from all 7 schools. That would sound really cool. That would sound like this thing goes across the entire university. And we did. So Food Summit 1 was born, and I gave each of these folks an assignment. I said, you have 10 minutes. Take your discipline and say what you think is the biggest food crisis issue related to your field, and what you think the solution might be. What's your hypothesis? And what other folks on campus you would need to address it if you wanted to test your hypothesis. Can you do it completely within the field of business, or do you need law? Can you do it completely within the School of Medicine, or do you need education too? And so that was our task. Everybody said, 10 minutes? That's not very much. It was neat, because it just went fast, and we saw a lot of big picture ideas. And Deborah Dunn refused to have a hypothesis. She said, I'm sorry, I'm from the design school. We don't have hypotheses. We do the deep dive. So if you want me to talk, you'll just have to let me do the deep dive. I said, okay. I need the school of engineering, and technically the D school is in engineering, so I went that way. So we said this is the intersection of human health and environmental health, and when you get to it, you get obesity and food insecurity and climate change, and it's really complicated, so boy, Stanford must be uniquely poised to address this. A lot of universities that are moving into the food field are ag schools. They're land-grant colleges, and they focus on the agricultural side and the yield side. So something that Stanford could do that's different is the food system side. It could be the different legal, business, education, health, etc. angles on all this. So we finished Food Summit 1. I didn't know what to sign up for. There's a whole bunch of venues at Stanford. I kind of went on a limb, and I signed up for McCaw Hall, which holds 400 people, and we filled it. It was just, nobody knew we would fill it. And then I talked to somebody and said, wow, that was a much better turnout than I thought. Am I obligated to follow up on this now? What should I do? He said, yeah, this could be great, and what you should do is you just talked about ideas. You should try to implement some of those. And I said, I don't have any money. He said, okay, well, work with what you've got and implement something and hold Food Summit 2 and show some continuity. So Food Summit 2 was in October. Another 400 people showed up. So one of the things we featured was I had been working with Full Circle Farm, and I have been for a long time. And at Food Summit 1, we had a breakout session afterward, and we were trying to identify different areas that we might move in, and one was school food. And the Full Circle Farm came and attended. And they said, we're really underutilized in the summer when school's out of session. That's when we have the most produce. So we said, how about a summer camp? How about summer camp at Full Circle Farm for underserved kids? So that's what we did. And the way I paid for it was Human Biology gave me 2 free interns. And the Haas Service Learning community gave me a free intern. And I had enough money to pay for one. And we rented a van, and we went to some community centers, and we got underserved kids and gave them a free scholarship. We brought them out here, and the basic idea was to stuff as many vegetables in their mouths as we could in 1 week and not let them know that our goal was to stuff as many vegetables in their mouth as we could. That it was fun, and then it was sing-songy and campy and not weeding. We didn't want them to go home and say, Mom, I can't believe you signed me up for weeding camp, right? So 39 11 to 14-year-olds signed up for this, and one of them didn't show up on the last day, but it wasn't because they weren't having fun. There were just some other issues. So all the kids finished this week of camp. And then the undergrads had a blast, partly due to my lack of knowledge of what was going on. So they signed up for this, and they said, what do you want us to do? And they were ready for me to guide them, and I have no idea what I'm doing here. I know how to feed and bleed people and how to randomly assign them. So I said, I don't know, read stuff. You're undergrads. And so they kind of took this over and took it upon themselves. And we had to come up with metrics. And I came up with a crazy metric of weighing the food that they're eating before and after. And they said, yeah, in camp, that is never going to work. But we've got a cool idea, this adventurous eating card. We'll make a game out of it. Put 20 vegetables on here. And every time you put some in your mouth, you get to put a hash mark. We'll have a different color for each day, so we even know which day they ate which vegetable. And in the end, this was our metric. They ate, on average, 50 vegetables over the course of 1 week by doing this. And they would pick food and bring it to the table at lunchtime and chop it and cook it on camp stoves. They made Indian food, Middle Eastern food, Latin American food. And we did a bunch of qualitative analyses. We did focus groups, and they had journals. And one of the students did this word cloud to show what the themes were of what the campers thought. So, in all honesty, they didn't like the academic tone, but it didn't come up much. They really liked food prep and their positive responses to new tastes. It just came up again and again. I wouldn't have actually predicted it. I didn't think they'd want to make food. But they did. They really liked making the food, especially if they picked it and then just walked over and prepared it. So this is our fun little word cloud. One of the things I don't have up here that the students thought of completely on their own was agents of change. So halfway through the camp, they were reading articles, and they found one opportunity where a group said, okay, at the end of camp, You get 3 choices of vegetables. Take one home and see if you can get your parents to include it in dinner and tell us the next day. So the theme left camp. It went home. And the one thing we didn't have set up is I would have loved to have tracked them. So next summer we'll track them to see if there's anything that sticks. Maybe nothing stuck, but they stuck a lot of vegetables in their mouth. It was great. So beyond just that, these 4 students, I'm not even paying them anymore. They found it so rewarding that they are right now designing a student-initiated class at Stanford. They will be the instructors. And when I get this next year's crop of interns, and apparently the people who gave me the interns and the money were thrilled with what the students did, because these guys gave this awesome presentation at the Food Summit. It was great. So they're going to give me more free interns for this summer to do it again. And these guys are going to teach them how to be better counselors in the spring quarter before the summer. So not only did I impact the kids who stuck the vegetables in their mouth, we transformed some of these kids into activists, which I think is at least as valuable as what I did to the 11, 14-year-olds, or more. So really quickly, I'll wrap up. I don't have a lot more. This was one other experiment that we did where Deborah Dunn worked with Matt and Ariana. And they did the design school thing going into some of the dining halls. And they were trying to get people to eat better. And what they ended up with was love food and energy food. That was the deep dive result. And so they labeled a bunch of stuff as love food and energy food. And the love was actually a picture of today's chef and his favorite pick of the day. And the chef started taking it seriously because his picture was on the wall. It was his favorite thing. So we're now publishing a paper, well, it's being submitted soon, where we collected data in 4 dining halls, and 2 got the love food and the energy food, and 2 didn't. And it was around finals time. And around finals time, if you weren't in the intervention dining hall, you ate horribly getting ready for finals. And we'll have to frame this properly. They didn't eat better in the dining halls that got the intervention around finals, but they didn't eat worse. They just maintained their vegetable intake, and they didn't go crazy and eat horribly. And it's statistically significant, and we get to report that. But more important, the design process was fascinating, seeing what was motivating for the students in the dining hall to be willing to choose one behavior over another. So that was another presentation at Food Summit 2, was that dining hall intervention. So it was the Full Circle Farm intervention. This one almost had something going with Google, but it fell through at the last minute. So this one wasn't an intervention, but it's turning into one. We found this guy, Frank Turner, from the Detroit, Michigan area, who came from the hotel industry and turned this hospital around. People weren't sure what they were going to expect from the hospital food section, and a lot of people said it was the coolest thing of the whole summit. So this guy has taken this hospital, turned it into a hotel. He has 24/7 room service, and he has a culinary arts institute where he gets free help and he trains people to cook food. He has a catering service where he caters to town. He has a destination cafe where people from town drive to the hospital to eat. I mean, can you even imagine that? I mean, think of the oxymoron that hospital food is, right? They drive to his hospital to eat. He has a greenhouse. He's just flipping this thing on its head, what hospital food was. And so because of this, we now have a whole group moving forward after Food Summit 2. We've got a civil engineer. We've got a bunch of business students that are familiar with Revolution Foods, which is a group that has made school lunch food off-site, and then they ship in the food. And the business school people, this is your area maybe more than mine, they like disruptors. So apparently Rev Foods is a disruptor. And they see that possible model in hospital food, that there could easily be a disruptor here, that you could scare Sodexo out or scare Sodexo to do a better job if you came up with a model. Because again, low-hanging fruit, hospital food is horrible. How many of you have had a loved one and brought food to the hospital for them because you were so worried that they would eat the hospital food that was being offered? Right? That's a pretty common experience. So I think what's going on here is we're changing some social norms, and the time is right, and I don't want to be left behind. So I don't think it's going to work to blame the food industry, and I don't think it's going to work to say, oh, we just need to educate more people. I really think the target that's really hot right now are these food systems, and there's so many that you could hit. I think school food and hospital food are the lowest hanging fruit in terms of cool things that you could people are really upset that food should be a lot better, right? But there's also university food. Stanford's really on the leading edge here. And worksite food. I just went down to this group in Buena Park, and their worksite food is awesome. It's Buchenheimer who does it. It's really, really a step up. Food bank food, here's one that we're going to fund. So I've actually raised $75,000 after Food Summit 2 to go to pilot studies. And the food bank that's Second Harvest locally, they're serving more or providing and distributing more and more produce than they ever had before. In the past, they were always just concerned with calories. Here's food insecure people. They don't have enough to eat. Let's give them calories. There's actually some publications that say that people who take advantage of food stamps and food banks can be more obese than the people who don't. But that's because the focus was calories, just giving them enough calories. So there's people who are taking the next step and saying it should be quality. So the Second Harvest, we're going to give them some money, and they've teamed up with one of my colleagues, Randy Stafford, who's an epidemiologist, and they want to see, how can they monitor this quality? Are people really using the produce, or are they throwing it away? Do they need recipes? Do they need some training? Did they ramp up the produce to be too much of the food that they're giving out? How are they going to optimize that? So here's an interesting target of food banks. And I know you guys have this $500,000 to $3 million range, so I asked them what their operating budget is, and it's way higher than $3 million. So they said a little tiny sub-arm of Second Harvest might be under $3 million. But this is a big thing. It's in San Mateo and Santa Clara County. But these guys are interested in food quality.
They don't cook the food, though.
No, they just, they get it donated and dispense it.
So you have to go to a soup kitchen or something and collect the data.
So, but I just keep finding spark plugs all over the place that just for whatever reason, I've had enough with the old system. I'm ready for a new system. I don't have the capacity to analyze it or evaluate it or disseminate it, but for the people that I serve in my food system, I'm going to do better than we did before. So it's heartwarming. I know the seniors, some folks at Avenida Senior Center, I'm thinking we could hit them up. And that could be a really cool group to talk to. I've given talks for them at this summer camp they have forever, so they owe me. So maybe we can do something. Prison food even. In the old days, the prisoners would grow a lot of food. I think that's come and gone, but they could be farming this food. And we've got a whole group that's really interested in food justice on campus. So I really think that this is an intriguing target for the next 5-10 years, and that there's just tremendous opportunity, especially where we are. So think about changing social norms, which I think normally seems out of reach. I think it's within reach. I think we could change social norms here. So in terms of collaborations that we could work on, think of who we are. We're not only in California that passes SB 1420 and Prop 2, but we've got the toy ordinance going right on in San Francisco right there. We've got these really great local organizations that are growing and that are scalable. That's a word you like, scalable. I didn't know what that word was, but scalable. Okay. At Stanford Dining, they're creating a whole, and this is another term I didn't know, supply chain management. So really what Matt Roth is in charge of is supply chain management. I was sort of struggling for what he does, and that's the simplest way to sum it up. Change your supply chain management. Optimize it. And we're sitting on top of the whole Central Valley right here in California. See, if it's going to happen anywhere, Stanford, Berkeley, San Francisco, it should happen here. Things could take off here. So, here's some thoughts. And I will just leave this slide up when I'm done with it, and we can do questions and answers. So we could be a knowledge partner for you guys. We have all kinds of, so our Stanford Food Summit email listserv is up to 700 people now from the first 2 summits. And we don't bug people a lot, but when we have an idea, we send it out to 700 at once, and we always get a reply back from somebody who has an interest or background or connection. So, and from all 7 schools. If you have interests, we'd be happy to advertise something that you want, some expertise that you don't have. We could go in together on some things. So I'm really hoping to take that $75,000 and grow it. So that was my first year. First I had no money. Then I got $75,000. I'm thinking I can raise more because there's a lot of donors out there that see this as a big picture topic. In fact, this is really interesting for decades, we have felt underappreciated at the Stanford Prevention Research Center. We do heartwarming things. We work on diet, exercise, smoking cessation, and the behavior modification to support that. But the big money goes to somebody who had cancer and got saved with some surgery or drugs. What about us? We've been preventing this. Nobody knows that we've been preventing it. So medical development has never really paid any attention to us. All of a sudden, medical development is sending donors to me. They're saying, dude, somebody called. They asked, this family wants people to eat better. So will you come talk to these donors? So I think I'm going to be able to earn some more money, but it's a different revenue stream for me. I'm accustomed to applying for NIH grants and your taxpayer dollars. Thank you very much. I've had millions of them. But I think this philanthropy stream or something else is going to be really interesting. So maybe we could leverage funds and work together. Maybe you've got some programs out there that you're not quite sure how to assess. To be honest, I'm not sure if I could assess them, but with this network that I'm building, I think we might be able to come up with somebody to give an assessment to you if we partnered that way. Another thing Eric and I talked about, well, what about convening conferences together? So I'm just enamored of this hospital group that's just taking off. What if we had the most progressive hospitals come to Stanford and have a conference on where hospital food is moving? That could be really powerful. I know there is a group that started it, and they had one in Seattle last year, and I don't know if there's a theme to it, but there's a lot of potential room, or any of these other food systems, or food systems in general. It's kind of wide open. So we could talk about some themes for doing that. And at this moment, when I leave here, I have to go home and write this grant to teach a new class. So the VPUE, the Vice Provost of Undergraduate Education, is offering this cool package deal. So if you come up with 2 to 5 faculty, multidisciplinary, and you want to propose some new innovative thing for undergraduate education, you and your partners each get $8,500 to meet basically once a month for a year and design a new class that would be some new pedagogy that you could offer to the undergrads. And what I'd like to offer is a food systems class. I was going to call it Transformative Food Systems. And it's going to be, this is my idea so far, twice a week for 2 hours each time. And for the first hour, you get a lecture from a different discipline: law, education, business, health, earth science. And for the second hour, we hold these in the design school, and you do that design school thing with the Post-its, and you brainstorm what you would do to fix a food system with that perspective. And then over time, you get more and more perspectives, and you see how you need different disciplines at once. And then the second half of the quarter would be, okay, now you team up and you really have to come up with something. You have to come up with an intervention targeting a local food system. And in the second quarter, your task would be to implement it. And Eric had the idea of a pitch night, where we convened some funders, and we had these students give their presentation as a pitch, and to see if anybody would bite for this idea to go local and take a full circle farm, or a second harvest, or collective roots, or the Avenida Senior Center, and say, yeah, let's go for this group right here. So those are some possible ideas for collaborating, and I really don't know what I'm doing, but I'm having a lot of fun, and so I would love to hear if any of that resonated with you and opens doors. That's what I prepared. I don't know if I'm on time, but that's what I prepared.
We have about 5 minutes for questions, I think.
That was great.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it does seem like we're at a tipping point here where we could take advantage of a lot of momentum. I mean, there's momentum everywhere with the food markets and
Farmers markets?
The farmers markets on one hand, and a lot of work, in organic farming and on the other end as well. So
There's issues. There's legal issues. There's business issues
Yeah.
that are barriers for these folks.
policy. So it's a little overwhelming. But we had a list of questions here. I was trying to think of what might be some of the more best questions to ask you. Could you remind me of the $75,000? You're funding some research with Was that?
Yep. So one of the group who gave us $50,000 in theory, they'll give us $50,000 next year too, because that's the kind of donors they are. They wanted it to go to pilot studies. So we actually wrote to our email list, and we say if you're a community member on our email list, submit a one-page proposal, and then we'll try to match you with a team that would try to meet your need. So the first one is the Second Harvest Food Bank. The second one is going to be the summer camp at the farm. I'm going to continue that. And the third one right now is the hospital group. We're giving that group a grant. Part of it is faculty release time, but part of it is some incentives and some other things. So we are funding, those are going to be our first 3 projects, and if the money isn't completely used up by those 3, then we could fund others, plus I hope we get more.
Do you have partnerships with other nonprofits?
No.
Okay.
No, we're just starting. I have no idea what I'm doing.
What hospital was that you were talking about?
So, it's actually a touchy subject, but Stanford, I don't know if you noticed, they're going to rebuild the whole adult hospital, and they're going to double the children's. And it's going to take 6 years. So we thought if we could get in there with a proposal right now, it's a very politically sensitive issue. Sodexo has a really long contract with them. And there's some really unreceptive people there. So Jesse Poole initiated a new program with them called Farm Fresh, and it was very difficult to work with them on Farm Fresh. So, but there have been some leadership changes, and they may be more open. So the most immediate ones that we would like to offer to work with would be Stanford Children's and Adult Hospital. But there's a consortium of hospitals locally. About 300 hospitals have signed on to work on better food. And there's a guy named Preston Mehring over in Kaiser, Oakland, who's brought farmers markets to a bunch of hospitals. So there's a bunch of hospital foodies around that we can bring to bear on this and see who's got room to move. They've also just published, they ranked 12 children's hospitals in California and scored them on the quality of their food. And Stanford was second from the top, but second from the top was a horrible score. It wasn't that they were super good, it was that they were the best of the worst. So a lot of them are really concerned that they got all this press for this evaluation of their food.
What about opportunities as, you mentioned this convening, or I'm kind of interested in the concept of this hub. We see a lot of these small organizations. We've been looking at food systems basically for the last 2 years now. And one of the things we see is a lot of these small organizations kind of all doing disparate things, not necessarily coordinated very well. There seems to be some level of coordination going on. What role do you see Stanford playing there? What roles have you seen others playing in that space? And how can we kind of move that?
It seems like we could network them. So I know San Francisco has a role model for that. I can't remember what they called this, but they put together a whole binder of all the folks working on food together and trying to make everybody aware of everybody else. So that's a possible model. I haven't actually looked over it yet. I've just heard about it. But yeah, connecting them so they're not reinventing the wheel and they're maximizing their resources. And if they put some money into some kind of advertising or promotional campaign, somebody else should be able to take advantage of whatever marketing research went into that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we know they're talking about it, and that someone involved with the Health Trust, they're talking about trying to convene them, and they are convened in that the Health Trust has set up the AmeriCorps programs to bring labor to a lot of the farms. So we loved a lot of those farms. They were just really small and, for us, a little too localized and maybe high risk.
And that's Full Circle Farm is on the verge. They just got a big grant from NVIDIA. They got $250,000. They won some contest about who's the most fundable and scalable. And so they have a really interesting program there where they have an education farm, a volunteer farm that's not like a community garden. The farm decides what they grow, and as a community member, you work on it, but you can take home whatever you want. It's not just your plot.
Yeah.
So they've got education, community. They've got a CSA program where they give out the CSA boxes. They've got the farm stand, and they've got an education director as part of the farm program. So, according to Wolfram, who I really like a lot, it's very unique what they put all in one space, all these different angles. And he's specifically being asked to scale it up and scale it down by others who are seeing the revival. And they're on the verge. He said they really can't move forward until they're sustainable. They're on the verge of being sustainable. If they get up to a certain number of CSA shares, they'll be able to pay their education director and all their operating budget. But they're still living to some extent off grants. Part of it was building some structures that would hold all the vegetables they were bringing in from the fields. And things like that. They're close.
Anybody else have
Can I pass one
a
in?
question?
Thank you for the presentation. It's really terrific what we're doing. It sounds like a lot of the work that you're focusing on is on the supply side, so getting organic food into these food systems. And I'm wondering, have you seen any good nonprofits that focus on the demand side? That is, we've got this advertising industry for fast food that's ubiquitous in this country, and it's pretty intimidating to try to chisel into that. Have you seen anybody that's addressing motivations for people in terms of the food choices that they're making and doing interesting work in that area?
Well, so we did that in the dining halls. And then another guy that's doing this there's a guy who runs Santa Cruz City Schools. It's not Santa Cruz County, it's Santa Cruz City Schools. He's this really progressive, innovative food service director. And he has to make all his kids happy. So he's really focused on what the kids will eat and what people said they won't eat, but when he serves it, they do. So the food bank, again, is a value. They're not just providing it now, they want to track it. They want to see who's using it. So I definitely think that demand is a big part of this. They'll all go out of business if people won't eat what they prepare.
Right.
One of the things that we're trying to show the hospital is there's 3 interesting groups on campus. Guggenheimer runs the Lexus Cafe in the medical school. Bon Appetit runs the cafe in the business school. And Arriaga Family Dining Center just opened up. And they all have really innovative, progressive stuff, and the lines are long. And then the hospital uses Sodexo, and people leave the hospital to go get food. So from the demand side, one of the hospital group's goals is to come up with an assessment that we can present and say, hey, hospital, look at these long lines, and they do it this way, and people are eating it. I know you're worried that if you did it that way, people would rebel and not eat it, but they do. They line up. So that would be my immediate reaction. Yes, it's a hugely important part of the equation. And we have the psych people, and willpower people, and behavior motivation people, and reframing people, and design school people. Yeah, that's what we want. You've got to change demand, absolutely. But if you have that demand and then you have no place to go, if the food they're offering is poor, then you've done all that motivating for nothing. So hand in hand.
A couple, just kind of on your list there, prison food. I know the women's jail in San Mateo County, they raise chickens, and they have a farm, and so they have a culinary institute, but they're teaching the women in the jail how to use the vegetables from their farm and the eggs and those things in the jail. But the county just unfortunately approved money for a brand new jail, and so they're rebuilding and redesigning this monstrous facility, and so it's potentially an opportunity to kind of continue that model so that it carries over to the new jail.
And that's where the civil engineers and the urban planners come in, because they're, got rooftop gardens and trellises and vertical gardens and things like that.
And my question is, I'm wondering if you've done any connections with horticultural therapy, because I know I work in some of the inpatient units with San Mateo County, and in our locked psychiatric unit, we have adults that are there for decades, and they're on a lot of medications that increase their weight and things, and so they have a horticultural therapist come in, and they have a garden out back, and they're teaching people how to eat healthy, but it's they're really trying to interplay with the diet and medications these folks are on with the food that they're able to afford and eat. So I'm just wondering if that piece is, if you see any connections with the horticultural piece or.
Not yet, but Liz Snyder, who is the first executive director of Full Circle Farm, has gone to several jobs since, and she just emailed me a month ago. She was aware of this correctional facility. It wasn't a jail. It's more like battered women or women that had their kids taken away from them, but they get this safe haven for a while. And apparently that director was open to planting a garden and a farm partly for therapy purposes, as you're suggesting. Yeah. So I'm sure we could get some psych people. There's so many angles. Yeah. But I don't know offhand who that psych person would be. But I think if I put out my feelers, there might be one.
I think, unfortunately, we're kind of out of time for questions, and I know there's going to be more, so I encourage everybody to pile them on Ann and Lisa and I, and we'll sort through and get the crucial questions out to Chris, and hopefully we can continue this conversation on multiple levels and follow up with with Chris on some of these, Christopher rather, on some of these opportunities and
These are nasty
everything
looking.
like that.
They're
So,
in my backpack for a while.
thanks again.
Yeah.